Dear viewers, welcome to English Literature with Afzal Majid Shahir. Today we are going to conduct an exploration of Bhabha's major cultural perspectives. The focal point of our discussion is cultural diversity versus cultural difference. Other aligned concepts are hybridity, third space, and signification. First of all, we shall talk about cultural diversity and cultural difference. Bhabha distinguishes between cultural diversity and cultural difference to critique how we perceive and categorize cultures. The concept of cultural diversity is static and comparative. In conventional views, cultural diversity refers to the existence of multiple, distinct cultures that can be imposed on the basis of their customs, traditions, and values. This assumes cultures are stable, self-contained entities with fixed identities. Comparative ethics often operates within this framework, treating different moral systems as clearly defined and comparable. On the other hand, cultural difference is dynamic and constructed. Bhabha challenges this static view by introducing cultural difference, which suggests that culture is not pre-given, but is continuously produced and negotiated. Cultures are not fixed, they evolve through interaction, translation, and conflict. Cultural identities emerge through discourse, how societies describe themselves and others, and are shaped by historical and colonial contexts. Cultural diversity implies a neutral coexistence of cultures, whereas cultural difference highlights power dynamics in how cultures are represented and constructed. For example, colonial narratives often defined non-Western cultures in opposition to Western norms, portraying them as exotic, primitive, or inferior. This is not just a difference, but a product of power relations. The second important concept of today's discussion is hybridity. Hybridity is Bhabha's concept for cultural mixing, where identities are not pure but shaped by historical exchanges, especially colonialism. Colonization did not simply impose European culture onto others, rather it created a hybrid space where cultures influenced each other in unexpected ways. In post-colonial societies, language, literature, and customs often blend elements from colonizers and the colonized. For example, English in India has developed unique linguistic forms. Similarly, Caribbean literature fuses African, European, and indigenous influences. Hybridity resists binary distinctions like East versus West by showing that cultures are interconnected and ever-changing. Hybridity is important because it disrupts the idea of pure cultural identities, revealing that all cultures are fluid and shaped by history. This challenges nationalism and fundamentalism, which rely on the myth of a singular, unchanged cultural identity. Another aligned concept of today's discussion is the third space. Bhabha's third space is an in-between zone where cultures interact, negotiate, and transform. It is neither fully one culture nor another, but a liminal space where new meanings and identities emerge. Examples of third space. Number 1. A bilingual person who navigates between two linguistic and cultural systems. Number 2. Immigrants who blend traditions from their homeland with their new country's practices. Number 3. Post-colonial literature that mixes Western and indigenous storytelling techniques. Third space undermines rigid cultural boundaries and emphasizes that identity is constructed through dialogue, not fixed categories. It allows for resistance. It implies that colonized people can interpret colonial narratives in their own terms rather than simply adopting imposed meanings. The last concept of today's discussion is signification and power. Signification is the process of creating meaning through language, symbols, and discourse. Bhabha draws from post-structuralist thinkers like Derrida and Foucault, who contend that meaning is never fixed. It is always been negotiated and contested. Consequently, cultural difference is not an inherent or essential trait. It is also the product of signification. Cultural identities are not simply discovered but are shaped through representation. Colonial discourse, for instance, constructed the idea of the Orient as exotic and inferior to justify European domination. Similarly, racial, national, and gender identities are produced through systems of meaning rather than being inherent. This has significant implications for ethics, as it challenges the notion of objective moral standards based on supposedly fixed cultural values. It shifts ethics from a comparative model which assumes stable cultural identities to a critical model that questions how these identities are formed. Conclusion: Bhabha challenges conventional understandings of culture and identity. Instead of seeing them as stable, he emphasizes their fluidity and hybridity. He introduces abstract post-structuralist ideas such as signification and discourse. He also disrupts binary thinking. Instead of talking in terms of self versus other or east versus west, he focuses on how culture shapes each other in complex ways. Bhabha's ideas are crucial for post-colonial studies, cultural theory, and ethics because they reveal how cultural difference is not just a fact but a process shaped by history, power, and language. Thank you very much.